Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fatherless Daughters Thrive YouTube channel. We're so happy to have you here with us. We This is actually our very first interview for our YouTube channel and all other social media platforms. So I'll say this is our very first fatherless daughter interview with a fatherless daughter. And we all have the pleasure of connecting with a fatherless daughter who is out in Santa Clara, California. Miss Cindy Riach. Okay, Cindy, how are you doing? You look so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. It's my new summer tan.
Yeah, it's summer tan. Cindy was just telling me she went to Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Jamaica.
yes, and you definitely were kissed by the sun, and it looks so beautiful.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll dive in, and Cindy is she has been gracious enough to share with us her story regarding being a fatherless daughter. And I just want to say for anyone out there who is or is not a fatherless daughter, it can be a very tough topic to speak about openly.
Mm.
And it kind of calls for one to be vulnerable, and you have to be authentic, and it's deep, you know. And for those of us who've been fatherless daughters our whole lives, we know what that can feel like. So I just want to ask everyone out there to listen with grace, to listen with patience, and to find a level of I'll say a level of sacredness and openness to potentially
Mm-hmm.
hearing a story and experience that you haven't had, or that you have had.
Mm.
And we just want to thank you for being here, and we're gonna allow Cindy to tell us a little bit about herself. And let's just start with that. Cindy, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us an overview of your fatherless daughter journey.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you for holding space.
Yeah.
It's been a journey, and I'm really glad to have this dialogue with you. Um, just because, as I was saying before we started, this experience is just so particular. Um, because I think culturally we hear a lot about men growing up with fathers and children in general growing up without fathers, but there's a very particular experience of, of being a little girl or a young woman or a woman growing up without her father. And my father and my mother were separated when I was 10 years old. And the memory that I have before that, it typically leans towards negative. My parents had a really contentious, pretty, uh, their relationship was rough, and we were witness to that. Um, and so much of my adolescence, I think I would describe my experience as like feeling like a sense of not belonging, and abandonment is a real experience. It's like a real felt visceral experience. Like even as I talk about it, I can feel it in my gut and like hear it like in my chest. Like there's just so much tension. Um, and there's in me, even though I've done a lot of work, a lot of deep longing still for um, this like masculine presence to hold me. And I did a little bit of work recently, and one of the teachers I came across told me that when women reach middle age, and I'm kind of getting there, I'm getting a bit older. Um, we reach a stage where we try to integrate healthy masculine, and whether or not you have a relationship to the words feminine masculine is all binary and constructed, and I do understand that. So for me, the specific experience of longing for masculine integration is who am I when I can protect and take care of myself and be that interdisciplinary? And that's typically associated with father. Um, and I know throughout my life, because I grew up without a father, I've I've done that for myself in ways that were both dysfunctional and somewhat functional, but I survived and I got here. And now I'm at the stage where I can consciously look at that and say, okay, what is it in me that can like reparent myself in a way that's really healthy? How do I integrate this this like this functional healthy masculine? Um, so that's kind of like in a nutshell where I am right now.
Wow, wow. No, that is I just want to celebrate you and um just affirm the strength that you have in being. I love how you said you're parenting yourself and you're being
Mm,
that protective measure inside of yourself and integrating healthy masculine. I think a
mhm,
lot of us have to find that space and that balance so that we can sort of parent ourselves because that's kind of what it calls for when your dad isn't around there to support you. So,
mhm.
way to make it on the other side.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Still in progress.
Way to fly over there and hold on to the masculine part of self. And all of us do have it in us. You just had to lean more on it in the inner world than you had on the outer world. So
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about like what did your family dynamic look like? You know, how did you grow up? How many siblings did you have? How did your mom and dad come together? Kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, in the early 80s,
Early 80s.
my yeah, my parents were both Vietnamese refugees, and they met in California. And they were living out what they knew, which is get married, have kids, and for them that was um, what led to happiness. But they were very young, and they didn't have the tools to integrate growing up in a war, uh, the migration, the new communist regime that took over. Um, and not only that, but they had the additional trauma of being immigrants in a country that didn't fully support them. I think in the early 80s, it was really, really difficult for Vietnamese immigrants to get the resources they need, especially for PTSD and other mental health services. It just wasn't an option on their menu. And so for them, having kids was the solution. And unfortunately, it didn't really play out that way. My father was a severe alcoholic and probably still is. And my mother, and I say this really lightly because I have um, I have pieces of this and I recognize this in other women, but when women feel powerless, which we so often do in this culture, we act out and play out um, semi dysfunctional ways of being in relationship and in family dynamics just so that we could survive. And so my mother was very hurtful and violent and was disconnected from a lot of her own maternal instincts in order to survive. And of course, this played out in their relationship. I am the oldest of three. I have two younger brothers, and so I am the only daughter. And um, and so I think there's an additional weight we carry as girls in the family of like, am I the caretaker? Am I the mediator? Am I, all these other things because we are so typically associated with nurturing uh, as a value to give to others, especially our family members. Was there more that you wanted me to say about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit about what the dynamic of the family was. So, um, so we got that you're the eldest of three kids. You
Mm-hmm.
mom and dad came here from Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and then at what point did you? Can you tell us about like when did you become fatherless? Like when did that occur?
Sure. My parents, um, their relationship was slowly falling apart, and around when it was, I remember exactly. It was exactly 2 weeks before my 10th birthday. My parents were separated. Uh, and it was really, really, it was a massive upheaval. There were cops involved. My father was in jail for a bit. Um, and, and then they placed a restraining order. Um, so there was all of that inside of the experience of three children and a battered wife situation. And inside of that, the only thing I understood was he's gone. Does this mean he'll come back? Okay, he's out of jail now. When do we see him? When can we see him? Why are we seeing him separately from mom? When is that going to go away? And then little by little, um, it's like we weren't allowed to go to a lot of the court cases. I was finally able to go to one when I was 10 years old, and I was the only one allowed to go. My brothers were too young to go. And it was the very last time I saw him. And I think that was when they finalized the divorce proceedings. And that was like when I finally got the full download, like, oh, they're no longer together and we're no longer a family. And what I didn't really understand on that day was that I was never going to see him again. And so there was another migration that happened. So right after that, we moved to the Bay Area because my mom really needed to make a change. And we kept expecting something, right? A phone call, a card. And we did have something here and there throughout the years, but it was really sparse. And it was also really tough because at the same time, financially, he was giving very minimal child support and it wasn't enough. And so I was feeling my mother's anxiety about money, and I was feeling just general, I guess like the general sense of like, where is he? When is he going to show up? We need him. And just feeling like that. Uh, I'm trying to switch back into that child self because like the girl who was like 10 or 11 or 12, like it was so tumultuous and it didn't make sense. And I could see it as an adult, like what was happening. But when I was a kid, I was just waiting. For years I was waiting. I thought he was going to show up to my high school graduation, and again I was waiting, you know. It was just still, and it took me so long to really feel in my bones like he's never coming back. He decided he was out, and it's taken me most of my adult life to reconcile like the why around that, even though I don't know his personal why, and I don't have access to him to really ask, to really understand that part of him. It took my own inner work of like exploring and like feeling into what those dynamics were that had him walk away from his three kids. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's an intense ride.
Yeah. No. And thank you for being so open to even, give us a little insight into that. Did your mom say anything to you? I'm just going back to that day when you were 10 years old and the divorce is final, and and then the days after that you actually becoming clear that he may not ever be coming back. Like, what did your mom say to you about that time?
You know, she wasn't explaining why he was gone, but she would say things that were manipulative and hurtful in another way. Oh, if you only told him you loved him more often, or if you gave him little gifts or asked him to stop smoking, or showed him that you cared. And underneath that was this undertone of he left because of you, right? Like you didn't do enough. And so that was that. So again, like what was tied into like all that tumultuousness was like, why is he gone? Will he ever come back? And like, was it my fault? I didn't
Wow.
do enough.
Yes. So she put the burden on your shoulders for him leaving. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty heavy weight to carry as a 10 or 11-year-old girl.
Hmm.
And also and the fact that you also didn't get the why. You didn't get the why. You just knew this thing was happening, and then you got the well.
Well, there
You
was the
had
implicit
enough.
why was like you were either, you didn't do enough or you were too much or
Yeah,
something, like
yeah. You
which
didn't show up the way you should have.
yeah, exactly.
Our little daughter, who we
Yeah, and I'm
birthed.
like, wait, where was like the blueprint or the roadmap to
Yeah,
to
nobody. You
how I
didn't
was supposed to show up?
show me. Oh yeah, like I didn't get that in my little baby kit. When I was younger, nobody like
Yeah,
sung
like when
that
I was
song to me.
3, how do you keep your parents around?
Right? I love that. I keep the parents around. Oh, that's fascinating. So, uh, so tell us, how did the dynamic? So once your dad was gone, so obviously we know the dynamic started changing because mom was pretty much blaming you for your dad not being there for how you didn't show up. You know. So then, how in including that, how did it change the dynamic of your family, even with your brothers, once your dad was gone?
So I remember processing this when I wrote to you, and
Hmm.
it was like very explicitly like what showed up and what felt really true and still is really true is I
Hmm.
became her surrogate husband. I
Yeah.
became my mother's surrogate husband.
Wow.
I I took care of, our bills over the phone. I registered my brothers to go to school. I emotionally supported them. I had a brother when my parents split up, my youngest brother was 3 years old. So he was just a baby.
Mm.
And here is my mother, single with 3 kids, trying to make ends meet. And so who's going to show up as a nurturer? Who is going to show up
Mm.
as the person who is going to take care of stuff? And this is again like coming back to what I said earlier about like that inner masculine. Like
Yeah.
I was a brutally shy kid. I like making eye contact and talking to people was so hard. And
Wow.
like here I am like trying to show up, like trying to talk to school administrators, getting on the phone and pretending to be an adult so I could pay the bills. Like
Mm.
just like things like that where like I had to show up. I had to order food for my brothers or we would starve. Like things like that where it's just I had to keep stepping into very uncomfortable places, which is in some ways like a very healthy masculine, but I didn't have the resources for it. So it really pushed me beyond my limits as a kid, and it gave me severe social anxiety as I grew up,
Wow.
even way into my adulthood.
Mm. So
Hmm.
surrogate husband and surrogate parent. How so you said it gave you severe social anxiety. So what did that look like?
Uh, the clearest example I have is I was in college and I started failing my classes because I couldn't go to class. Just being in a room full of people, being witnessed was really scary. Just 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 filled me with like paralyzing fear. Um, and on top of that, as I was like exploring just having a social life, um, I would I would get ready for a party, drive to the place, and then sit outside in my car, paralyzed, and then start up the engine and turn around and go home. Like just things like that manifested in so many different ways. Like just and it should show up with like even showing up at work sometimes where I'm like, I just can't handle it. I'm calling off sick. And then way into my late 20s.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Did your father show up ever again? Like when did you see him again after that day in the court and all of that?
Yes. So in my early 20s, I don't know how we reconnected, but we did. Oh, I do remember. One of my brothers turned 18 before he graduated high school.
Mm.
So he contended that he didn't want to pay child support anymore because he was already 18, but he was still in school. So my mom and I went to court and I saw him again. and we managed to have lunch. And I think we saw him once more a little bit after that, in Orange County. That's where he still lives. And then there was, massive break. When I was 27 years old, I got engaged. And I know culturally in America, we ask, the man would ask, if you're in a hetero relationship, the man would ask the father for the woman's hand in marriage. And this is also really true in Vietnamese culture. So I was like, Duncan, we got to find my father. We got to find my father. And I don't know what it was like, because this man didn't show up as my father for almost 2 decades. And I was like, we got to find my father so you can ask him if you can marry me.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know who I am. He hasn't had a relationship with me for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here I am, still like really insistent. Like there was like this cornerstone of tradition and like this metaphorical connection, right? Like this type of bond, like when two men come together and they talk about the future of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's a little bit like patriarchal, because like if we think about it, um, agriculture, sell off the woman, do all that stuff. That aside, there was still something really strong for me emotionally. We had to find my father. You have to ask him before you marry me. And we did find him. We found him, I think, through one of my cousins.
Okay.
And Duncan and I had just taken a trip to Vietnam, and I was looking for my grandfather, my paternal grandfather. And when I reached my father's house in Vietnam, they told me he had just died, just like months before that. And we weren't told that. We didn't have a relationship with that entire family. And I was just so sad, because I was like, oh my gosh, I could have had a relationship with my grandfather, and now I don't. So there was just like a huge, just like a feeling of huge loss,
Mm-hmm.
and a type of grieving that felt like just really unsettled. So I spoke to my cousin in Vietnam, and she reconnected me to my father. And in finally, I think, as like a full adult self, like a more realized self, I understood that even though I could be physically connected to my father, I could never really have a relationship with him. One of the pieces is because he doesn't really acknowledge that he wasn't there for us. And two, he's such a severe alcoholic that he is not connected to reality. And I can't be in relationship with him because we are never in the same place. There is never shared reality between us.
Mm.
And so I had to grieve him a second time.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's had to grieve him a second time. Mm. What did you wish that you could have gotten from him? If he were to able to give it to you.
Yeah. The two words that came up for me was guidance and protection. He knew who my mother was, and he left us with her anyways. He left us alone with her. And inside of that, I still have a lot of anger. And I don't have full forgiveness for him around that. And that's my work to do. And the second piece is, he took away from us guidance, and inside that guidance is like resources, like how do we understand the world, right? Because there's a mother understanding of the world, and that's a very beautiful and valid perspective, but there's a father understanding of the world. How does the world operate? How do we interact with people so that we could succeed or achieve things, or do all these external things? Like, I was the first person in my family to go to college,
Mm.
and I had no guidance, and it was so hard. I was just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And there was a lack of the why. Like, why am I doing anything? And that goes hand in hand with like the depression I had throughout my 20s. Like, I don't know why I'm here. What is the purpose of this? If he didn't want me, did that mean that my existence, this entire thing, my every breath that I take, is that all a mistake? You know, and it was just such a questioning and like a real lack of um there's a saying in Vietnamese, uh the connection to father is like the root of the tree.
Yeah.
It's it's what um it's what grounds us, and it's what lets us know the why and where we came from.
Yeah.
Where were the seeds planted? How are we connected?
Yeah.
And I feel that intensely. Like we were missing out on those roots.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, how did the missing out on the roots show up? Let's just start with your relationships. Like when you started to, I know you mentioned you had gotten engaged when you were 27, but how did you navigate being in a relationship with your partner or partners?
Hmm. Um, yeah, there's some real dad stuff in there.
Like you ready to open this can of worms? Yes.
All right. So, you know, my first romantic relationships, I played out my mom. I was mean. I rejected. I did the push and pull. Like I was, because it was what I knew. It's what I saw growing up. And so I was like, well, this is how relationships work, right? Like I'm going to be mean and try to get my needs met that way. And then I grew up a little bit more and I realized it didn't work. And it kept resulting in men leaving. So again, the abandonment stuff. And then me questioning, like, what did I do wrong? And after I graduated college, I got into a series of relationships with men who are much older than me. So my partner before my husband was 18 years older than me. And it was just, if I could like bottle up that feeling that I had with this man, it was just like, when are you gonna father me? Show up and father me, you know? When are you gonna, and there were beautiful aspects to this relationship. But it's interesting. This past week, I had a very good relationship with a therapist at my retreat in Jamaica, and there was just one moment where he touched the back of my head, and it was just like fondness, and we were just running dad jokes all week, and it was just like this additional layer of just him touching my head, and it's just there's a very different feeling around a man touching my head than anyone else. It's almost like a baby's head getting cradled. I think that's what it feels like. But this partner used to do that. He used to hold my head. He was a trauma therapist. And so he really understood like what it meant like to hold certain body parts with a certain type of energy. Um, but it's taken me a lot. And thankfully in my marriage, we've developed a lot of secure attachment. And we take turns playing child or parent to each other and getting to this really resource space of like actually being partners with each other, where we're the same age and working with each other instead of like please daddy me or please mommy me or all that stuff that happens, and which are all valid and healing. And as I've integrated more and more of my own inner father, I need my husband to father me less.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Mm. As I've integrated more of my own inner father, I need my husband to father me less.
Mhm.
That's good. You should just put that a quote and just post that. Wow.
That's your tagline for this post.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear your journey though. As you were just speaking about your mom, you sort
Hmm.
of playing out your mom. It's reminding me of when my one of my mentors shared with me that our identities are formed through the relationship with our parents. And so, it was interesting that you said, "Oh, I was playing out my mom in relationship," because that's how you saw your mom play out in relationship. And then you weren't able to really see. I will. You saw how your dad play out a relationship. He didn't quite show up. So did you feel there were ways you weren't also showing up? Well, I guess so, not as partner, but you were showing up as child in some of these
or
dynamics,
mommy,
or mommy.
bec-
Yeah,
because I was um, because I was parentified at a young age, and so
yeah.
it was how I was valued, and so sometimes I get into group dynamics, and like my knee-jerk reaction
Mm-hmm.
is to show up for someone, support them, and overextend or be responsible for their experience.
Yeah.
Um, and it gets tricky because I am in the mental health field, so like creating very, very immaculate boundaries around my energy.
Yeah, because there are
And
lots of people to show up for in that field.
oh yeah, so I need the invitation, and I need to feel in like, do I want to take this invitation? So that's a huge piece around me playing out the mother that I wanted, which I'm actively always engaging with. Um, and it's interesting, like, can't talk about my father without talking about my mother,
Yep.
but she's uh so in the beginning of like my romantic relationship life, I was acting out mother, and then I felt shame, and then I felt like I was declawed, and I had like all my teeth pulled out, and so I was in relationships being the doormat, and uh playing like the identified patient, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm depressed and horrible, I'm a bad person, poor me, please save me, rescue me. And so I played that out in relationship, and it was inside of that was like the shame, like I don't want to be like my mother. And what I did was I conflated what I saw as power and the protector in her and the survivor, and I conflated it with cruelty. And I was like, I will not be cruel. And because I wasn't playing out the cruelty, I also like didn't have that masculine. I didn't have like that, like, I know who I am in the world. I got things set in place. I'm organized. Like I'm responsible for myself. Um, and I'm deeply empowered. That was completely disconnected for a very long time. Even in these last few years during the pandemic, I had a massive collapse. I can't function in the world. I don't know how to build relationships. There's something really fundamentally broken about me. And that again is like the cycle of like a father who wasn't there to give me that guidance, that support, uh, that disciplinary part of like, you got this. You're much more empowered than you think you are. And so what I did was I internalized this part of me, because it really is a part of me, um, that's cruel, and a part of me that could be really wicked and horrible and all this other stuff, because that's a part of all of us. We have cruelty, we have meanness, and we also have power, and we also have agency and sovereignty and authority. And unfortunately for me, I conflated all of those things together, and so I couldn't move. The easiest thing was to collapse, to feel powerless. and so like now I'm on this next step of my journey of like separating all those parts, and like again integrating the healthy father parts and the healthy mother parts, and like really engaging with like all the shadow aspects of the meanness, the cruelty, and all that stuff, and like, yeah, I can be like that. That's what it takes to be human.
Can you elaborate on shadow aspects for the listening audience, so then they'll, anybody who's
Sure.
unfamiliar with that, they can have a little insight.
Sure. So shadow are parts of us, or even like parts of the world that we notice that we reject in ourselves. And that could be things like I said, like about cruelty, and um, like if you see like really strong personalities out in the world, and we're like, oh, that person's a narcissist, or that person's a borderline, or whatever. Like we have those aspects of us. Um, but I also really, really want to introduce the idea of the golden shadow, which is like positive aspect of ourselves that we have rejected. Like, oh no, I'm not powerful. Like like, and what is actually true is like, yeah, I have a lot of power. I have so much agency. I really do know myself. And I think for me personally, I rejected that golden shadow aspects of myself because of that conflation I was talking about.
Mhm.
But for some people, it's like, I can't see that I'm brilliant, or I can't see that I'm a kind and wonderful human being, because like that feels dangerous to me. So that, again, like whenever we have parts that we either kind of see within ourselves, but most of the time is externalized, like we see in other people,
Mhm.
and we either feel jealous or triggered or however that might show up, it tends to be a shadow within ourselves.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Um, can you talk a little bit about how your father's absence impacted your finances, and we'll go ahead and tag onto that, your personal self care.
Sure. Do you want me to start with when he left?
Sure.
Yeah. So he was our breadwinner.
Mhm. The
my
breadwinner, main breadwinner. Yeah.
and my mom was the at-home mom.
Mhm.
So when they got divorced, she she took on a lot of jobs, but we were hit really hard. He made he made good money. My brothers and I were sent to private schooling when we were with him. And when we made the transition through the divorce, and we moved to the Bay Area, I think we were only getting $900 a month for all three kids. And
Mhm.
that's like in the late 90s
Mhm.
in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
Like that goes to rent. Now let's figure out
Woo.
food,
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, so I this is actually really interesting because like I have like varying relationships to money. When I was a kid and I saw how my parents fought about money, it was my father withholding money from my mom, and my mom like being like a free spender. Not that she was with my father, but it was she didn't have that freedom being at home to just have like a little bit of cash to like get something for herself or even buy us a chocolate bar. He was that tight-fisted around money,
Mhm.
and I could feel that tension like right in my gut. Like it's just money can't let anything leak out. And then when my mom started providing, it felt like I can feel the anxiety. It just felt like there was just never enough.
Mhm.
And those are two like separate experiences that I definitely carried into my adulthood. Like there's never enough, be really tight-fisted around money. Um, don't let anything leak out. And at the same time, like what did come out of like watching my mom earn her own money and like start making a little bit more was like she was actually really generous when I got older. Like um if she felt like there was something that we really wanted, like even if it was just like a food item, she was like, "You have one life to live. Here you go. Here's $5." And you knew that $5 was so valuable. It was so much. It took so much to earn that $5. So so I think I still am quite generous with my friends and people I love. Like it's a very interesting thing remembering my relationship to money being rooted in how my parents related to me.
Mhm.
So self-care practices.
Thank you. Yep.
Oh man.
Well, how did
Uh,
your self care like? I mean, not everybody knows what that is when they're younger, because just depending on your childhood, you're gonna find happy no matter what. It's kind of where you are, unless there's some level of abuse or trauma there.
oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
so
Like
we kind of like aren't talking about self care as kids, but when you came to knowing like, oh, there's this other way to be in the world, as a teenager, as an adult, where, oh, I actually have to take care of myself beyond the basics. Like there are these other emotional, spiritual aspects of self. and the physical too, of course. But yeah, so tell us what your experience.
Yes. So unconsciously, in my adolescence, I could not help myself but be creative.
Hmm.
Like I just couldn't stop. I wrote poetry and I illustrated them and I made up dances and I made all the neighborhood kids like do like play out my choreography. My brothers and I would like play act all the time. So I had a very creative mind. And so in some ways, like I think that was the first seeds of like how I learned how to self-regulate and to take care of myself unconsciously. I have no idea. I just could not help but do it. And in college, like I kept turning towards it, even though I felt shame about it. Like, oh, I'm gonna be a literature major. That means I'll never make money, but I can't help it. I want to read Wordsworth. I want to read Shakespeare. I want to study. I want to immerse myself because like this is the world that feels real and true for me. And like in hindsight, I could see that in those worlds, like I could actually self-regulate more so than like reality because reality was just too scary. And so I was just overwhelmed all the time. And so books, films, TV, those were my teachers. Those were my nurturers. Um, and as I got older and started doing therapy, um, the creativity was always there as an asset, even though I would turn away from it because of the shame.
Hmm.
Like, ooh, this is selfish. I can't do this. I was still able to turn towards other things. And I'm going to say this very lightly, but vanity is my first, like, not my first, but like, vanity is definitely a gateway to
Mhm.
like self-care.
Yeah.
Like, this is my way to lose weight and this is my way to like have better skin. So I meditated, I ate differently. Like, and I
Whatever
never,
motivates you, it's fine.
that's the thing. Like, I never want to put down vanity because
Yeah.
like it really does push people to do better
Yeah.
sometimes in the same way that shame can too. Although
Mhm.
I'll say, I want to hold shame very lightly as well.
Mhm.
Um, so meditation, qigong, um, I did so much work. Um, and part of that vanity was also like being perceived by others in a certain way. And so in my early 20s, I was in a very experimental
Mhm.
group of people who were either in therapy land or aspiring therapists or already therapists. And so we would do psychedelics. We would try on these workshops and do tantra and like all these like funky, crazy alternative things. And inside of that was like my longing to belong, again,
Mhm.
related to father. Um, but it taught me so much. It
Yeah.
taught me so much about myself. And again, like it comes back to like the self-regulation and like, wow, like I tried this like crazy thing called qigong or yoga over here, but I feel so much better. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I feel so good. I'm going to do yoga every day. Why isn't everyone doing yoga every day?
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were healing yourself in the midst of all of that too.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. I love that you found ways. I'm like, I don't know if you were always actively looking for it. Were you always actively looking for it? That was your vibe to actively go for the healing mechanisms?
It was, I am broken, and therefore, what's the next best thing?
Gotcha. Where it landed you somewhere where you could heal yourself. You found a sense of community, and you ended up being with folks who actually had some real tools to support you. So I mean, that's fascinating that you got yourself in that space because not everyone has had the privilege of navigating to something like that and having access to that kind of information. But there was something in you that sought it out and that knew, like, this is what I need. You know?
I could have easily gone down the other route. I
Yeah.
could have I could have taken the wrong drugs. I could have
Hmm.
fallen in with the wrong friends who helped me feel belonging, but they weren't the right people, you
Yeah.
know? I
Yeah.
just happened to be in the San Francisco Bay
I
Area
know
in the
you
late
say that.
2000s, where everyone's all about like, oh, we're on the crest of consciousness. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
I'm gonna ride that wave.
You're in the right place for self care, no doubt about it. That could be a more perfect place on the planet.
Yeah, give me those mushrooms. Let's do this.
Yeah. Woo! Oh, that's so awesome. What a blessing. What a blessing. Well, what are you grateful for in your father's absence? I know it's a weird question, but I always find it interesting to ask, like, how was your father being absent actually support your growing, you know, now that it's already happened? What, looking back, what are you grateful for in his absence?
Sure. I think um I think when he left, it felt really destabilizing because like instead of like standing on two legs, I'm standing on one. But in hindsight, the more that I felt about it, um, we just gained so much peace not having my parents be together because they weren't good to each other, and we were just feeling that impact over and over again. So that's one layer. And the second layer is I had enough space to recognize my father as a human being and not just like the role of father. And by having that distance of like, there's that human being over there, and yeah, he's flawed. And yeah, I'm choosing not to have a relationship with him. And I don't know if I could do that having grown up with him. I would
Mm.
have I would have been dealing with that dysfunction all the time. And I know plenty of people who grew up with addicts, and I know how tough that is, and they're just in in for that ride all the time, all the time. And I had enough space to not fall into that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's some deep. Yeah. Wow. That's. Ah. Well, I'm so glad you didn't fall into that space too. Yeah, I'm
Thanks.
so glad you didn't fall into that space too.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and you've become an incredible example of the other avenues you can take.
Mhm.
To deal with fatherlessness, to deal with being in a single parent home, to deal with being the surrogate husband. You got it all, girl.
I got a lot of resources
You got
too,
a
because
lot of resources. Seriously.
when stuff goes down, I'll be there taking care of stuff.
Yeah, we know who to call. But it
Yeah.
also must be really nice, and I am so glad that you just went on vacation. It must be
Hmm.
nice to like take a chill pill and embrace rest, and yeah. So tell us more about that experience of Cindy when you aren't being the hero or you hadn't had to do the rescuing, because you're obviously in a very healthy relationship now. So
Mm-hmm.
tell us about the experience of relaxing.
Ooh, I mean, it's having enough space to feel all my feelings. And when I'm in that space of knowing who I am and having permission for every single aspect of my experience that comes up, which only happens when I'm relaxed
Mm.
and not like doing all the things, like trying to put out all the fires. When I'm in that space, I know which direction I want to go. I know that there are things set in place systemically that I'm not okay with. And I feel like really like on my own 2 feet, super grounded, like this is not okay and I'm going to do something about it. And so, like, my value system becomes really clear. The permission settings are all on. I feel super empowered. And like, I'm in my own authority. I know who I am. And like, the world is just available. I'm engaged. And I just, I'm excited. I just want to get things done. And so that's how I get resource. It's like, you can feel all my things, super relaxed, hanging out with Jamaicans, swimming in the ocean,
Yeah.
having a mango every day. Like, oh my God, it's
Oh, that sounds
breath,
so good.
tropical fruit every morning
Mm,
and just feeling like the universe has got me.
mm,
And like in a way that's so much deeper than what I wanted my father to show up
mhm.
as, right? Like for me, it was like, Father, when are you going to show up and hold me?
Yeah.
And now, as an adult human being, having done a lot of the work that I've done, I get to relax, and the universe has got me,
Mm.
and that's what relaxing does for me.
Yeah, I think you just relax all of us listening to that line. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, if it's not too personal, um, if you could just describe your experience of being in the arms of the universe, what does that feel like?
Hmm. Trying to tap into how it felt when I breathe, when I take an inhale, I can feel my breath moving through my entire body, and then it extends through my feet and way into the earth. And then from there, I can feel the nutrients and the resource and the support it's actually giving me. And it's just always there.
Mm,
The ground is always beneath me.
mm. That's beautiful. It actually comes around full circle because you were saying earlier how in the Vietnamese culture the father is like the tree and he has the roots.
Yes,
Girl,
that's like
you're like
awesome
that's
connection.
your invisible tree. Yeah.
What?
That's beautiful. Wow.
But so much of what I felt in Jamaica was actually very feminine in a
Mm,
powerful way. Like,
mhm.
wow, in my body, in my DNA, and the blood that's coursing through my body are thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions of years of like all of this life that has come through me, like our ancient ancestors, like ancient humans, like who like made it work
Wow.
because they had their kids and they kept going, you
Mm,
know? And here we are in 2022 living out their dreams.
yeah. Hmm. It's beautiful. So beautiful. Ah. Well, I'd love to ask you if there's any advice you can give to, let's start with the young, yeah, the young girls who are without fathers. If there's any advice that you could give to a young adult girl who's fatherless, what would you say to her? What would
Mm,
you want her to know, to help give her strength in this experience of being fatherless?
mm. Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do.
Mm. Trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. And what about adult women, especially the ones who haven't had access to the tools that you've spoken about that you've been using actively in your life?
Hmm.
What would you say?
Definitely get support from other women. Um, I think together as a community, as sisters, um, and of course, we play out mothers, daughters, sisters with each other all the time. I think we get a lot of resources. We can get a lot of wisdom. Just leaning in and having conversation like we are, um, getting resource from women who really have our back.
I love that. Thank you, Cindy. Is
Thank
there
you.
anything on your heart or mind to share? Anything else you want to say?
I mean, I feel really full right now.
No,
Like
you
I'm,
look
I'm
like
just
it.
super, I'm just super grateful that we're here together.
Yeah.
Because I do know, I know how it feels like on so many levels. Like I can still tap into that loneliness and like that like really intense, like I just want my dad, like that really strong feeling of like I just want him to show up.
Mhm.
And I just I just want all of us to like have enough resource to like show up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And not that we don't need each other. I don't buy into ultra independence, but finding people who show up for us in that way, definitely. Community.
That's beautiful. I just want to thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart. Because as we started with, it's talking about a parent, especially a daughter. Speaking of, being fatherless, it's not always the easiest thing to just be
Yeah.
vulnerable about and speak about. But you've been so gracious to us to share that part of your life with us. But even more than that, I just want to celebrate you for you've tapped into something so much bigger than just a parental relationship. It's like you verbalize it as being connected to the universe, and that like that's your root and that's your true tree now, and that's how you're moving through life, and you can tell the fullness and the wholeness of who you are as you're coming in, like when you're speaking. I can tell that you're a whole new different kind of person than you were when you were 10 years old in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want
Mm.
to applaud you too for making healthy choices in your life. And just being a woman who is uh, about the power that's within you versus the circumstances of your life dictating, how you'll move and be. And it's not that they didn't impact you, but you obviously aren't letting them define who you are. So,
Mm.
way to
Mhm.
be a human being, having a spiritual experience. Holy Spirit in you was like, "Woo, child, we done been through peaks and valleys and all kinds of things."
Yeah, I hope I didn't take you too far out into outer space.
Oh
I
no,
just wanna like also like be like, yeah, I'm
oh no.
also always in progress.
No, it's all good. There's something for everyone in everything that you share. And I think it's great because some of us need to go in outer space. That might be the answer for us. And you might have been the person that showed us like, oh, that's what I was looking for. I just needed Cindy to show up to tell me that. And you did. We applaud you for showing up today and giving us what you gave. So take care of yourself, and I guess we'll be talking again.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Well, bye for now. And for the rest of our audience, we will definitely be bringing on more amazing fatherless daughters. And we might have some reoccurring folks, come back and share a little bit about their experience as they move through life. But I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you, Cindy.